Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now a few videos back we looked at how a powerful modern graphics card, the RTX 4070 Super, handled one of my favourite games of all time, GTA San Andreas, at 16K resolution. It ran pretty well despite the massive number of pixels on screen, and I just couldn't resist trying out more titles at 15360 by 8640. It's ridiculous, I know, and as I soon found out, not always possible no matter how much power is thrown at the problem. Now I don't have a 16K monitor, and even if I knew where to buy one, I certainly couldn't afford it. Thanks to Nvidia DSR and the custom DSR tool, however, we can actually run games in 16K on a lower res display. I cannot describe how sharp this is because YouTube processing wouldn't have done it justice, but I can just tell that GTA San Andreas here is even sharper than my eyeballs will actually allow me to see. I can feel them trying to focus. 16K gaming isn't always so straightforward though, and sometimes pure power is irrelevant, especially if there are stability issues or a game just doesn't support such a high resolution. Take BioShock Infinite for example to start. This will support 8K, at least according to the graphics menu, but even selecting this will cause the game to revert back to 1080p, so 16K was definitely out of the question. The end result will of course vary on a game by game basis, and my choices today were based on what I thought might run well with this hardware at this resolution, mainly older or less demanding games. Of course, what's a GPU benchmark without the original Crysis? Sure, a lot of modern hardware will run this maxed out without breaking a sweat in 2024, even at high resolutions. Once again, this game supports 16K, but selecting it causes a crash to the desktop. Maybe the word support isn't actually the right one to use here then. For some reason I tried Counter-Strike 2 next. This is more demanding than its predecessor, but I thought we might still be able to scrape by at 15360 by 8640. What actually happened was that we got about 2 FPS and the graphics got a little bit broken. To be honest, I think this is also a VRAM limitation at this point. This 12GB card has simply run out of resources. If you're watching in full screen, then you can probably just about make out the Reaver Tuner overlay on the left of the screen, which reports that all of our available GDDR6X has been allocated. A 4080 Super or 4090 would have definitely been the better choice for such an endeavour. But don't let the experience so far put you off. This near £600 graphics card isn't completely useless at 15360 by 8640. Fallout 3 is up next. The launcher allowed us to select this high resolution without any problems, and I thought it best to stick with the low preset, apart from the textures which I set to high for some reason, as if the VRAM wasn't going to be used up in half a second anyway. The bright white light that fills the screen as we escape the vault still feels as magical as it did in 2008. It's not perfect as the percentile figures demonstrate, but I'd still call this one somewhat playable. Few gaming moments come close to that of discovering Megaton and life in the Capital Wasteland for the first time, and now we can do it in glorious 16K res. While we're on the subject of games that are running pretty well, I also wanted to try Battlefield Bad Company 2 because I used to love playing this back in the day, and here it also ran at 16K, the option was available in the graphics menu, everything was set to low, and as you probably expected, we are seeing around 30 FPS or lower. Sort of playable, similar to the console experience on the consoles that it launched on of course, but yeah, definitely a lot sharper here. But not quite playable, I don't think, in an online competitive setting, but the single player is sort of doable. Now then, sorry to interrupt what was a fairly acceptable experience, but we must move on. Far Cry 2 is another game from my teenage years that I absolutely adore, so naturally I just had to try it. Again, we can select 16K resolution, but applying the graphical settings, be it high or low, DX9 or DX10, causes the game to crash to the desktop. Up next we have Forza Horizon 4, one of my favourites of course because it's set in the British countryside, albeit with less rural crime and potholes. We get a low memory warning on startup, but we still average close to 30 FPS. Sort of. We have of course sacrificed most of the graphical beauty in favour of performance, so once again we're running with the lowest options. It still looks pretty good to be fair, all things considered, and I'd chalk this one up as somewhat playable. Somehow the game has allocated 12.2 gigs of VRAM and is using over 13. There's no escaping this, to be honest, at this resolution, even with reduced graphical settings. Fortnite, while it does support 8K and actually runs really well in performance mode, doesn't let us choose 16K, so we have to move swiftly on to the next result. I've featured the results as I tested them today, so they're in no particular order. It also means we don't have a block of games that didn't work and then ones that did. This is GTA 5. Again, 8K works just fine, but 16K, to start with at least, gave us an error. I have no idea what it says because the error dialog box was so tiny, but the game closed to the desktop. Now GTA 5 also has a resolution scaling option, so my next thought was to select 8K and then double the res scaling from within the graphics menu. Things started off quite badly after doing this, and I thought about abandoning the test, but the longer we played, the smoother the game got. This is unusual because I was expecting the opposite to happen, and it would make more sense, to be fair, if we're slowly running out of VRAM, but I guess not. At 16K res with 12 gigs of VRAM, I guess it was alright. The Witcher 3 crashed in DX11 or DX12 mode. In fact, my PC jammed up completely and I couldn't actually do anything until I turned it off from the PSU. I'm going to say this one probably isn't playable at 16K. Half-Life 2 Lost Coast was a tech demo that showcased high dynamic range lighting, and to be honest, I think it still looks decent. I didn't need to reduce anything to the lowest settings either, though maybe that would have helped us hit 60 FPS. 45 FPS was the average, and combined with the pretty respectable percentile lows, I think the performance here was acceptable overall. There's something about Half-Life 2 that keeps me coming back, especially when it comes to putting certain hardware through its paces. Now, just like GTA 5, Red Dead Redemption 2 not only lets us turn the native res right up, but we can also adjust the resolution scaling as well. What I found interesting was just how much VRAM the game wanted to allocate at 16K and how big that difference was compared to 8K. We're talking 25 gigs compared to just 8. At the lowest settings too. Of course I got around this by changing the resolution from within the INI file first of all, but it's irrelevant really because the game wouldn't load either way. In fact, when I alt-tabbed out there was an error waiting for me, so it had basically crashed into an infinite loading loop. This again potentially the result of no more available video memory. Let's finalise on a couple of more positive results, even though one of these results is still a little bit broken. This is Mafia 2, the original 2010 release, and it runs sort of fine on the 4070 Super at 16K. For about a minute anyway. We can set the res just fine, but there is the small problem of half the in-game world not loading at all. Again, I'm assuming a VRAM limitation more than anything else. Overall, we averaged 27 FPS, so it felt a bit like playing the game on the Xbox 360 or PS3 back in the day. Buildings and textures do eventually start to pop in as we make our way around the map, some of them anyway, but after a while the game just said, nah, I'm out, and crashed to the desktop. Leave it to Minecraft to save the day then. We didn't even need to settle for the fast visual preset because the fancy graphics worked just fine. We were averaging 100 FPS after 20 minutes of gameplay. I guess if you want to play Minecraft at 15360 by 8640 for whatever reason, then you'll be pleased to know a 4070 Super is going to be absolutely fine for that. That's probably not the only conclusion we can draw here, but it seems like a nice place to end. I'd like to try this on a top tier card at some point too, and see how the extra power and VRAM changes things. The 4070 Super is of course a modern mid-range card on paper, and it's a term I don't really like because it's close to £600 here in the UK, but yeah, this has been a modern mid-range GPU versus 16K gaming, and I hope you enjoyed watching because I certainly had fun making this video. Thank you, and I'll see you all next time.